Today I'd like to talk about the role of prototyping in the design process and how the methods we use in prototyping might be applied more broadly to bringing about more just and equitable futures. MDIT is a future-focused program, a Masters of Design, Innovation and Technology. The term design innovation presents us with a particular view of the future, one of continual improvement and advancement, a future that replaces and overwrites the past. Design innovation is sometimes positioned as a technological inevitability and understood as the march of progress and the associated winds of change. But of course, the futures we make are not unmotivated, and as Tony Fry and Domini Pereira point out, design innovation is structurally elemental to and circumscribed by its subordination to the economy and culture of acceleration. And that is, the futures we produce through a lens of design innovation tend to be economic in value, singular in voice, and consolidating of existing power relations. And every new future we envision acts to erase other possible futures. So while design innovation is an act of futuring, it is also an act of defuturing. It can be argued that design innovation gets its power from its ability to defuture, from its ability to erase alternate futures and to silence this act of erasure. And that is that the act of erasure is itself erased. This double erasure produces an illusion of technological determinism, narrowing our apparent choices and limiting our ability to think beyond existing normative structures. Rethinking design innovation as defuturing confronts the ontological meanings we have constructed around design and notions of progress. It forces us to understand design innovation as a contested domain of action, a political act where violence and destruction is in lockstep and inseparable from acts of creation. The questions we are faced with are, how do we make futures that are equitable and just? And how do we remain attentive and responsive to the futures that we are erasing? These questions have arguably never been more important, as we're facing some enormous challenges. I'm in two minds whether to read this out because it's so depressing. So we all know we're facing climate change. It's expected that 1.2 billion people will be displaced by climate change by the year 2050. Now, to put that in perspective, in 2022, around 100 million people were displaced by war and famine and climate disasters. So we're talking about a tenfold increase in this kind of movement of people, and they're moving because they can't stay where they are. There's no viable future there. Environmental degradation, 1 million species face extinction due to human action. Now, the study here, the UN, that when they produced this study, half of those 1 million species are basically the walking dead. They're gone. There's no coming back for that. The other half, maybe we have a chance to save them. We're facing enormous disruptions to labour. The introduction of robotics and AI is going to change the labour force dramatically. Jobs that we thought were safe are going to be eliminated. There's a whole restructuring. It's not that we won't have as many jobs, maybe more jobs will be created, but people will be made vulnerable through this process. And there's increased wealth inequality. While wealth across countries, the inequality across countries has improved in the last 20 years, the wealth, the separation between rich and poor within countries has dramatically worsened for at least 70% of the population of the world. And this is for emerging economies and developed economies. So in Australia, for example, the distance between rich and poor has increased in the last 20 years. If we continue down these paths, then the world is going to become a very inhospitable place for a large percentage of the population. We need radical change. As Fry and Nozick point out, design can't limit itself to changing the patterns of human consumption, to altering supply chains, or to sourcing biodegradable materials. It must envision the possibility of designing new conditions for being human. Now, I should point out here that Fry and Nozick aren't saying that these things aren't important. We do need to find renewable sources of materials. We do need to alter supply chains. We do need to intervene in the processes that are taking place in the world. But it won't be enough. It won't be enough to avoid the disasters that we just spoke about. We need to find a new way of being human in the world. We have to confront and change our extractive and consumptive behaviours. We have to rethink what it means to innovate, and we have to challenge the progressive and economic lens through which we value innovation. Fry and Pereira propose the term Contra Innovation, innovation to counter innovation that defutures. So let's imagine the MDiT program as a Masters of Design, Contra Innovation and Technology. What sort of designer might you be if you were a Master of Design, Contra Innovation and Technology? How might design prompt and support diverse and equitable ways of being? I've got a particularly slanted view on this. We can only talk about this from our own experiences, I think. Now, I'm going to talk about it from a prototyping perspective. Prototyping plays an important role in the design process. It does all of these things. Prototypes let the world into the design process. They allow us to test ideas in the world, in real localised situations. And because of this, the future is not imagined as some other place, as technological futures so often are, but as a specific place with actual consequences for real people. I've been teaching some version of electronic and interactive prototyping for the last 10 years at RMIT. And this is the field in which I work. So these are the tools of prototyping. And the tools started with this board. It's coming out of the wiring project by Hernando Barragán. And the wiring project is the foundation on which all the other things on this page are built. Well, not all of them. Some of these software programs predate the wiring. For example, processing here, wiring was built on the processing integrated development environment. Okay, so this is what a large proportion of electronic prototypes built on, prototypes that designers make, not electrical engineers, but designers. They work in this field, and we have the wiring board, then its successor, the Arduino. For a while at RMIT, we were using this board here called the really bare bones board. It was a cheap way to get an Arduino. More recently, we've moved on to ESP boards. Of course, we deal with a whole lot of sensors and motors, actuators, relays. The software, of course, that goes with this hardware, Arduino IDE. We also teach creative coding with processing and more recently with P5.js. And we teach with other things, node-based visual programming like tools like Max MSP. And more recently, so we started, like I say, over 10 years ago. More recently, we've been using APIs, network connected objects with ESP, connecting to public available APIs, using P5.js to connect to TensorFlow and machine learning libraries, and also using open source dashboards for displaying the sort of data we're collecting and viewing that. So that's our prototyping world. I'm going to show now an example student project from MDiT. This is by Faraz Harazan. Hi. Andy Chu and Erica Zhang. And it's called BASED. and it's a play on the word biased, if I'm correct. Yep. It looks at the bias that exists within machine learning models, and particularly image generation models. So it starts with this inquiry about what's happening within these models. What sort of results do we get when we use these models? And it uses a very simple and I think elegant prompt here, where it asks Midjourney to draw a picture, and it throws in a kind of a random thing in that picture. So it asks them to, in this first one here, it's asking to draw a character that is quiet, reserved, highly ambitious, intellectual, charismatic, and then it throws in the words likes dumplings. Okay, so that's this first column, and this is what you get with someone that has those qualities but likes dumplings. And then the next one, different set of qualities, and likes fish and chips. And, you know, so it's playing with, it's using these kind of, it's kind of like acupuncture points to generate a response from the AI that tells you something about the model that the AI is trained on. So from these experiments, the project produced this camera device. So now if I understand it correctly, it takes your photo, then it turns that photo into a description through AI, through an AI model. So the photo, an AI describes what it sees in that photo, and then it takes that description and it feeds it back into an image generating AI, and from that description it makes a new version of yourself. So it's a way of understanding how you might be seen by the AI machine, by the AI infrastructure. And I think it's a really great example of how, of what the prototyping process does. The prototyping process lets you explore the world and the very specific qualities in the world. I think one of the problems facing design is that the responsive, adaptive and experimental approach that takes place in prototyping becomes solidified into a product and is then pushed out into the world with a very fixed set of relations. The users of products we design generally aren't given access to the experimental, inventive side of the design process. We have divided the world into producers and consumers, and we actively police this boundary. We use legal and physical barriers to prevent the people who we have labelled consumers from actively engaging in the making of their material world. But they do it anyway. So there's lots of examples I could have used here. I'm using cars because they're so prevalent. Images of cars are so prevalent on the internet. And specifically, these are Bosozoku cars from Japan, and you can see that, you know, these modifications here, they develop their own specific language and traditions. They develop a community around this material act of making. People hack and modify the objects of mass consumption. They form communities around the objects that they consume. We think we, the designers, are the innovators, but innovation happens elsewhere. In recent years, there's been an explosion of this term life hacks, adaptive responses to everyday life. Under this heading, you can find everything from toasting popcorn on a hair straightener to improving your mental health. I both love and hate this field. I love the inventive, playful acts of making that respond to circumstances and materials at hand. And I hate the tendency for this activity to get caught up in neoliberal notions of efficiency, convenience, and self-improvement. I think the fact that we have named these actions life hacks shows just how alienated we are from, how alienated we've become from our material world. I don't think these hacks intervene in the process of life. I think they are the process of life, a responsive and playful exploration of what is possible, a process of world making. To a large degree, we've designed this kind of playful openness out of our material world. I think we need to find ways to dismantle the barriers we have constructed between production and consumption, and to replicate openness found in design prototyping in the world at large. Let's imagine for a minute that prototyping wasn't a stage in the development of a final product, but an end in itself, or more accurately, that there was no end in this process, that the objects we produce are designed to remain responsive and open to divergent use, to misuse and to reuse. Supporting a creative engagement with the objects of mass consumption may have a number of positive benefits, and this is what I think it might achieve. Bonnie Honig states that public things like infrastructure and shared resources foster citizenship and collective action against neoliberal forces. And I believe that the objects of mass consumption can have a similar unifying effect, producing communities of knowledgeable and concerned users, people who actively engage with issues of common concern. Now, we tend to think of objects as things that exist within this personal sphere, but the mass-produced object actually exists very similarly across many worlds, in many lives. People go online and they talk about their experiences of use with that object, and that experience of use mirrors other people's experiences of use. We can think of the mass-produced object not as an isolated individual experience, but as a public space, a distributed public space in which people participate in. If we open objects up to adaptability, then they will be more likely to fit someone's use scenario. If someone is able to modify them and share that modification, then the objects we make will be better fit for purpose. We don't need more objects in the world, we need less, and we need to take better care of them. We need to build practices of kinship and care with the objects in our lives. We need to take responsibility for them, to repair them and to find a place for them at the end of their life. And I think getting people more involved with their material, with the material objects around them will help do that. Engaging creatively with our material world means engaging in acts of co-creation, where materials play an active role in the world-making process. And so that's this last point, becoming with. And this shifts us from an ontology of being to one of becoming with. So it's a kind of, you can go from being to becoming and then to becoming with. Okay, you're becoming, you never become, you never reach a conclusion. You're always in a state of becoming, and you're always in a state of becoming with the things around you. Okay, let's go back to this prototyping map, because this is the reason I drew it in the first place. I want to show the sort of things, for us, we prototype in this space quite easily, and the reason we do that is because these platforms are made available to us. The part in blue here is open source. So, some of these sensors you could consider are in the public domain, so are probably open source as well, public domain knowledge. But the ones in blue are intentionally open source. People have built them and shared them so other people can use them and build on them. This is important, that they can use them and build on them. And they produce communities. They produce a community of sharing. So even if you're not contributing to the open source projects, if you're using them, you're more likely to share what you're doing with that project, and you share your experiences and you build the community. This openness is critical in supporting the experimental approach needed for prototyping, and it may be critical in helping us build alternative futures. We can't know all the consequences of what we design. Even the best intentions can still have bad outcomes. And as designers, we can't follow all of our products into the world and track their impact. So we need to pass some of this responsibility onto consumers. But we must give them the tools to be able to take this on. We need to build objects that support divergent practices of use, and we need to build platforms that allow communities to form and share their experiences. We need to think of consumption as Contra Innovation, innovation that counters defuturing. Consumers need to be able to prototype their own futures, to remain responsive to the worlds that they are creating, and to do this in collaboration with their human and non-human allies. Thank you.